Shalom. This week, here in the land of Israel, we are reading two Torah portions, two Parashat Tazria and Metzora. While in the diaspora, because of the 8th day of Passover that was observed outside of the land of Israel, with its separate Torah reading, congregations will be reading Parashat Shemini, and we'll all be catching up with the conclusion of the book of Leviticus the week before Shavuot. These two Parashiot, Tazria and Metzora, relate to various aspects of what is known as Tuma and Tahara, which is commonly translated as purity, or that's for lack of a better word, or the lack thereof. And that in itself is problematic because these complicated laws of Tuma and Tahara, purity and its lacking, are not about a physical condition. They're not about a physical settlement. They're actually spiritual concepts, even psychological concepts, and they have tremendous ramifications. Some of these ideas that we're reading about in these Torah portions have a direct bearing on our lives today, in the cycle, for example, of Jewish family life, but others are applicable only during the time of the Holy Temple, when the manifestation of a person's spiritual stature is so much clearer, and our relationship with God is so much easier to comprehend in the time of the Holy Temple. There's a particular affliction which is described in both of these two Torah portions of Tazria and Metzora. It's described, it's known as tzarat. This word commonly translated as leprosy, but to equate the condition that's being described here in these Torah portions, the condition of tzarat, to equate that with the disease known as leprosy is totally inaccurate, because tzarat, a person who suffers from tzarat, is known as a Metzora. This is not a disease at all. In fact, it's not even a physical condition. It's actually a spiritual condition with a physical manifestation. But it is something directly and on a very personal level between the Creator and an individual. And this tzarat, this affliction, can appear in the walls of a person's home, in a person's clothing, or in one's very flesh. It can only be diagnosed by a Kohen, not by a medical doctor. And the main aspect of its treatment, as it were, in a person, is a matter of varying stages of quarantine and isolation until the stage of purification and an offering, depending on the circumstances. Parashat Metzora begins with the stages of the Metzora's purification. It sounds quite unusual when we read about it. The Kohen shall command for the person being purified, there shall be taken 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, crimson thread, and hyssop. The Kohen shall command, and the one bird shall be slaughtered into an earthenware vessel over spring water. As for the live bird, he shall take it with the cedar wood and the crimson thread and the hyssop. He shall dip them and the live bird into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the spring water. Then he shall sprinkle 7 times upon the person being purified from the tzarat. He shall purify him. He shall set the live bird free upon the open field. The person being purified shall immerse his clothing, shave off all his hair, immerse himself in the water, and become pure. Thereafter he may enter the camp, but he shall dwell outside of his tent for 7 days. This is very, very amazing, and something we find very difficult to relate to. The person who found himself at the receiving end of this blight was extremely isolated, and the process that he goes through in order to reinstate himself in the community is quite striking, probably traumatic. In the beginning of verse 33 in chapter 14, we read about the affliction of the tzarat in houses. And we read of this very, very unusual blight of the houses of tzarat. It's pretty scary. According to tradition, there's a direct connection between the affliction of tzarat and antisocial behavior. And most specifically, our sages teach us, most notably, that speaking badly against others, known as lashon hara, evil speech, in its various forms, is something that brings one to be subject to the blight of tzarat. And the question of whether it's on one's person, on one's clothing, in one's home. It depends on various circumstances. And there's nothing as isolating, there's nothing that causes separation like lashon hara, when someone speaks ill of someone else and that person, the subject of the speech, finds himself ostracized from the community, and then the person who did the speaking having to go through a similar situation. But if you live, for example, in Honolulu, San Francisco, or Ashtabula, you needn't worry, because this type of tzarat, this type of blight in houses, which by the way is called nigei batim, which literally means affliction of houses, first of all, it doesn't exist anymore. And second of all, when it did, it only existed in the land of Israel. This is a spiritual malay that's being described here in tremendous detail in the Torah, which only affected homes of the children of Israel in the land of Israel in a very specific time period. So, is this another Zionist conspiracy? In a way it is, since God is a Zionist, meaning that he is quite focused on his people in the land of Israel, as he makes abundantly clear. And you can't make this up. This whole incredible lesson of these afflictions of homes that took place during this time that the children of Israel came into the land of Israel. So there must be a lesson for us here today. And that is, you see, the Jewish people in the land of Israel have a mandate. And their mandate is to become a model society. So these afflictions that affected the homes of individuals, they would only have meaning in the land of Israel. And indeed, it only took place during the period of time after the land had been divided up into individual tribal family holdings, and only affected such buildings that were private dwellings. Because the nega, the affliction in the home, doesn't refer to the building. It's not about this particular house. It's the personality of its inhabitant. So it's not like, oh no, you live at 23 Elm Street? Oh, that's a very problematic house. I once lived there. It's not about the house. It's about the home. That's the difference between a house and a home. So if you lived in 23 Elm Street, you might not have had this problem, but I might. Because it's the home, it's the domesticity. How the person reacts within the community, which is what a house represents. And that's why it's only considered a nega. There are very, very complex laws here in the Torah about how the Kohanim have to diagnose this disease, and how they can tell and if it's spreading, if it's not spreading, how severe it is. It only can be declared as a nega, as an affliction of tzarat, if it's on the walls. And the walls are the element of the house that isolates, that separates the house. It can only be on the actual materials of the house, the stone, the wood, the plaster, only the normal house of normal construction of 4 walls. It's all a symbol emphasizing the role of a house as making a home. And our sages emphasize that these afflictions are basically a mark of God's displeasure. And again, they're primarily directed against one whose own selfishness shuts up the home and prevents it from becoming a place of the service of others, of neighborly kindness. There's nothing like speaking against other people to isolate those other people. And so the verse tells us, a person to whom there appears a blight in the home, let's read it together. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, when you arrive in the land of Canaan, that I give you as a possession, the one to whom the house belongs shall come and declare to the Kohen, saying, it seems to me something like an affliction has appeared to me in the house. And then the Kohen has to take command. He has to command that everything shall be cleared from the house, and then he has to come and look at the affliction. The verse here tells us that the person who is the sufferer, he comes to the Kohen, and he's described as follows: Uba asher lo habayit. The one who has the house, to whom is the home, he's the one who comes to the Kohen. Why is he being described with these words, asher lo habayit? The one to whom it's his home, it's his house. It's because the problem has been that he's kept his home exclusively for himself. And maybe it's kind of like a manipulation of the rights of property by this person saying, what's mine is mine. He forgets to include others. Because the idea here of the children of Israel coming into the land is to make a Torah society before God. And that way every person can have their own individual house as well, but it all has to become a home because the very ground of the land of Israel is made of Torah. So the individual rights to property, the nachala, the particular inheritance, the landed property, was given under the aegis of Torah, so that the Torah declares to us, when you arrive in the land of Canaan that I give you as a possession, I will place a tzarat, affliction, upon a house in the land of your possession. The one to whom the house belongs shall come and declare to the Kohen. Because basically, what Hashem is saying to us here is, from the moment that you take possession of the land which I give you, I'm going to set my finger upon the houses of your possession, so that one who owns the house only for himself must come to the Kohen and say, it seems that God is pointing at me. He's pointing to my house. And then as this nega, this spot, this affliction, runs its course or doesn't, various stages, modifications, it remains unchanged, or it gets smaller, or it disappears, or it spreads, or it returns, or it doesn't, until finally the house is either pulled down or declared to be okay again. All these, just as the negaim in the flesh, in people, or in their clothing, are admonitions and warnings and intensifications, giving time for the consideration of the owner of the house to really internalize what's going on with his life. And this whole process that we read about the bird, sevenfold sprinkling of the blood of the slaughtered bird together with the living water and the live bird and the bundle of cedar and the hyssop and the dyed wool, as well as sending the live bird free. It's so important for us to understand when we learn about these things. This is not voodoo. This is not some leftover of some primitive culture. These are the words of the living God. This is the Torah. There is a very powerful and enigmatic and dramatic psychological process that Hashem is causing to bear upon a person before restoring the house to its place in the community life, which, by the way, is similar to the individual before he's readmitted to the community as well. And the message to the person is that living for oneself without being connected to others and without giving to the community, that's justified only for the life force of animals and for the vegetable world. Man can only justify himself through a life of service to others, readiness to give of himself, and only when he doesn't shut himself within his four walls. You know, the halakha, the law is about these things, that if one would simply enter into a home which had been declared to be affected by this condition, that person brings this tumah, this state of impurity, which is actually a spiritual imbalance, brings it upon himself. The person would stay in the house even for a short period of time. That would make the clothing he was wearing, and even anything he would have in his pockets, that would make him also tameh. It's the difference between merely coming in contact with such a place, with such a personality, with such behavior that's emanating from that place, or actually becoming active and taking a part in it as well. You know, at one time, according to our tradition, our sages, the sages of Israel, were on such a spiritually attuned level that they understood and they recognized in the course of their everyday life what specific punishments they were receiving from heaven were all about. When something happened, they knew. They were so in tune with themselves. They had such tremendous self-awareness that when something happened that was amiss, they were able to hook it up and realize why they were getting that. And that's very, very similar to this idea that the Torah tells us affected all of the children of Israel during these initial years of the homesteading process of the land of Israel. And I think one of the major lessons for our time, you see, living in the land of Israel is a great privilege. It's the palace of the king. The relationship here that we have with our Creator, the relationship between the king and his people, is so blatantly manifest and made clear in many unique ways. Living in the land of Israel is not only a great privilege, but it's an awesome obligation, because it's made of Hashem's will. It's made of Torah. And the goal here is to become a society of giving, a society of living for others. And you know, getting a smack, getting a little bit of a reprimand from Hashem, that's also a very great privilege, and one has to be on the level even to deserve to get that reprimand. And that's what this teaches us. That's what this whole section in the Torah is really all about. It's about a people who were starting out on their way, and Hashem was so compassionate to give them these directional signals, these tweets, these SMSs, to give them this very real way of knowing when they were losing focus and when their priorities were getting confused. And it's the same thing for us today. Living in the land of Israel is a tremendous privilege, it's the palace of the king, but it's also an awesome responsibility. It's a responsibility to the entire world. And we also hope and pray that we should be on the level to deserve to get the reprimand and to see it for what it is, to see it as a manifestation of Hashem's love, so that we can be worthy of living in this holy land, and so that we can truly open our homes, turn our houses into homes that will be based on living for others and truly creating a society that will become a light to the nations.